is Annie Hall. Quick description for those who haven't seen it. Alvy Singer is a divorced Jewish comedian, reflects on his relationship with his ex-lover Annie Hall, played by Diane Keaton, an aspiring nightclub singer, which ended abruptly, just like his previous marriages. So it's a very short description, says nothing, but I'm sure most people listening to this podcast have probably seen Annie Hall, but it's one of those movies that is really about nothing but about so much. And as I start to think about my New York movies, what I was saying earlier about New York being this mecca of art culture, and then people who are intellectuals but also troubled, great to hang out with, but also neurotic. I feel like this movie kind of sums all of that. And it's set in New York. You get to see all the landmarks and all of that, of course. So it's sort of, to your framework, it does transport you to New York in a very visceral kind of way, but in a fun way, while you're sort of on this, journey, hanging out with these people at these nightclubs and bars and restaurants. So, till this date, when I sort of crave New York, no matter where I am, this is the movie that I have to put on to kind of feel that feeling of the people and this and the city and all of it. And frankly, just Woody Allen in general, like he is my passport to New York. And in many ways, movies, despite all the problematicness of Woody Allen, um, and this is almost like a topic for a different podcast, but what made me fall in love with movies is his sort of sensibility towards New York and the people over there. And in a weird way, as specific as that is to New York, it's also universal, because I think it's sort of really a micro look at neuroses and fun and the energy of New York all happening at the same time, which I think are pretty universal themes. Everybody is on that scale differently, of course, but they are universal themes. So yeah, there it is, Annie Hall.
Did you see this film before going to New York, or so you saw this before you ever visited New York?
Definitely. Definitely visited. Yeah, saw it before I visited New York. And then it's funny, great question, because I think in subsequent viewings of watching it, as I've gotten more and more familiar with New York, the movie has not only grown in my mind, but I almost feel like that, oh, I sort of know these people, it's because now these people are grounded in a physical space. I've been to those places. I've been around New Yorkers who sort of remind me of those characters. So the movie has sort of taken a life of its own in my head, versus earlier when I had seen it before visiting New York, it was just kind of this, you know, distant but very captivating beacon of, oh, this is what life in New York is and how exciting that could be to visit. So if that makes any sense.
No, totally. Yeah. So I've seen the film. I am not a fan of Woody Allen. The couple films of his that I do enjoy are the more like screwball comedy stuff, like Bananas or Zelig, and then his more grounded kind of slice of life, even though obviously they're comedies too. Films like an Annie Hall. I saw Annie Hall pretty late in my life, just because I never really got into Woody Allen. But it was one of those movies where it's like everyone keeps talking about it, I should see this. And again, putting all the problematic stuff aside, I've just never really been a big fan of him as a filmmaker, like I said. So again, not to do with the problematic thing, but I will say for sure that film definitely does transport you to New York for sure. Like it makes you feel like you're there. I think like you said too, it captures, like I've known people that are basically cut right out of that film. Like different types and slices of that city. It definitely is like The New Yorker. I think that film does a really good job of capturing a certain type. Obviously, there's millions of people live there. I don't want to say they're all exactly like characters in Annie Hall, but you do feel like you have been to the city and you've talked and met with real New Yorkers from having watched that film, for sure. And you could, make even arguments around like Woody Allen's characters. He's sort of a stereotypical certain type of New Yorker for sure. He definitely represents a type of one type of someone who lives in New York. So I think it's I would have honestly been surprised. I mean, I guess I know my list and I didn't put Annie Hall on it. I guess spoilers, my number one's not Annie Hall, but I would have been surprised if, I guess you didn't put this. It's like a list of New York. If Annie Hall isn't there, it's something that feels kind of wrong, even though, God, I'm not a fan of this film, but it's like, you have to have that in a conversation about New York. It's so part of the fabric of what that city is, that I'm glad that you said it just so we could talk about it. Cause it almost feels like we'd have to mention it either way. You know what I mean? It's something that is so associated with the city for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about the same thing. Like for me personally, but sort of just in general, if my New York list was being put together, I just felt that a Woody Allen movie had to be on it in some shape or form. And if there was one, I mean, Manhattan is probably more of a love letter to New York. And I watched that too recently, just to kind of refresh my memory. But the problematicness of Woody Allen intersects with Manhattan, like
in a much bigger way
on the nose, that and that's sort of now become my reservation with the movie, that I can't actually watch it.
No, that's fair.
Because it's just so close to all the stuff. But Annie Hall, I think, is a good second and maybe it's a more rounded New York movie because it's grounded and real, as opposed to Manhattan, which, famous opening on, Gershwin's soundtrack with fireworks and, the city lights, and all of it is probably more grander, but it's not as grounded as Annie Hall is. So maybe it's a better pick in that sense.
Yeah, it's not as romanticized.
Yeah.
For sure.
Exactly.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.